Okay, so we're going to restrict movie management operations to store managers. First of all, we need to create this role in our application. And more importantly, when we deploy our application, we should have a user assigned to this role. This way, the store manager can start entering movies and then delegate other tasks to the staff. Now, I want you to pay all your attention here and follow every single step I'm going to do. First, I'm going to register a guest user. So guest@vidley.com. Okay, now back in Visual Studio, go to Controllers and open up Account Controller. From the list of methods, select Register Method. We're going to modify the logic of this action and assign any new users to the Store Manager role. Now, you may get freaked out and say, Mosh, but this is too risky. I know. Just bear with me. We're going to remove this code in a second. I just want to populate our database with a user in the Store Manager role. So here, if we successfully create a user, temp code. So earlier, I told you that to work with ASP.NET Identity, we use manager classes like user manager, role manager, and so on. All these managers use a store under the hood. So first, I'm going to create a role store. So var role store, new role store. Now, this is a generic class, and here we need to specify the type of the role class in our application. Now, in this application, we don't have a specific role class, so we use the one that comes with ASP.NET Identity. It's called Identity Role. And note the namespace. It's in Microsoft.ASP.NET.Identity.Entity Framework. Now here in the constructor, I'm going to pass a new application DB context. Okay, here's our store. Now we should create a role manager. Role manager, new role manager. Again, this is a generic class. So here we pass identity role as the generic parameter. And in the constructor of the manager, we pass our role store. Now to create the role, we call role manager.create async. Now because we set the generic parameter to identity role, here we need to pass an instance of identity role. And in the constructor, we set the name of the role. I'm going to set this to can manage movies. Hang on a second, what happened to Store Manager? Well, the best practice is to name these roles after the actual permissions. Store Manager is a pretty dry name. And later on, as our application grows and we give different permissions to different roles, we're not going to remember what privileges this role has. But when we use a role name like can manage movies, this is quite obvious. So we call create async, and because this is an async method, we need to await it. Now I'm going to assign this new user to our new role. So we use user manager dot add to role async. Here we need to pass the ID of this user. So user.id and the name of the role, can manage movies. And finally, we await this call. Now let's register a new user. Control F5. I'm going to log off first. Register. admin@vidley.com. Okay, beautiful. Now, before we forget, let's go back here and remove these 4 lines. Now we have 2 users, a guest and an admin who can manage movies. We want these users and the new role to be deployed with our application. So how do we do it? Remember the technique we used for populating our database with reference data? We use a code-first migration. So open up Package Manager console, add migration, seed users. Okay, look, this is an empty migration because we have not modified our domain model. Here we're going to use plain SQL to add these 2 users and the corresponding role in our database. Now I show you a quick way to do this. Go to Solution Explorer, click this icon to show all files. In app_data folder, here's our database. Open it, tables, right-click ASP.NET Users, show table data. So here are the two users we created. Select both, right-click, script. That's what we need. Copy. Back to our migration. SQL. I'm going to use a verbatim string so we can break it up into multiple lines. And simply paste these lines. Now I'm going to repeat. Back to SQL Server Object Explorer. Right-click ASP.NET Roles. View data. Here's our Can Manage Movies role. Script. Select, copy. Paste it here. And finally, we need the record that associates our admin user with the new role. One more time. ASP.NET User Roles. That's it. Copy. And paste it here. Now, I'm going to remove these records from the database and then run this migration. This will populate our database with the users and the role. So, ASP.NET Roles, delete, and similarly in ASP.NET Users, delete these two records. Now let's run the migration. Back to Package Manager console, clean up, update database. The beauty of this approach is that if we run these migrations on another database, let's say our testing or production database, we'll have the exact same setup. So this is the proper way to seed our database with users and roles. Now, if you have read some of the tutorials on the ASP.NET website, unfortunately, they show you a poor way to do this. Here's an example. This tutorial, and many other tutorials I have seen on the web, is telling me to use the seed method of the configuration class of Code First Migrations to add users and roles to the database. I haven't covered this method in this course because that really belongs to Entity Framework. But basically, when we run update database in Package Manager console, this seed method will get executed. Now, what is wrong with this seed method? Why shouldn't we use it? Because you're not going to execute update database on your production database. If you want to do this, you have to change the connection string in web.config and run update database here. But this is very risky because if you forget to change the connection string back to your development database, you're going to screw your production database. Now, the reason I'm showing you this example is not to criticize Microsoft, but to let you know that there are a lot of poor information on the web. And just because you see a solution on Stack Overflow or even on Microsoft website doesn't mean this is a good solution. You should always think about what you read and choose the right solution wisely. Okay, our database is in the right state. Next, I'm going to show you how to use this new role in controlling authorization.